Hello, everybody. Today is November 16, 2022. My name is Dr. Carrie Arnold. I am the Program Director for Evidence-Based Coaching here at Fielding Graduate University. Welcome all of you into this space. This is our monthly Coaching in Context series. We offer this to the coaching community as a way of keeping you engaged in new material, new research, new thought leadership, and just great content from amazing scholar practitioners. Some work at Fielding and some come to us in the field. Today, we have a combination of both. We have Dr. Kathy Norwood here, who is faculty at Fielding Graduate University in our evidence-based coaching program. And she is partnered today with Marianne Burke. Dr. Marianne Burke is not faculty at Fielding in the evidence-based coaching program, but is an active partner with Kathy in the content that she's bringing you today. And I'm very excited. I will introduce them shortly. Real quickly, this is eligible for an ICF CEU. You want to be present for the entire hour. Towards the end of the hour, about 10 minutes to the top of the hour, I will put a survey link in the chat box. You just need to click on that or copy and paste it into your browser and take the very brief assessment in the next 24 to 48 hours. And then the registrar's office at Fielding Graduate University will, within the next 2 to 3 weeks, issue you an ICF CEU. So let's get into it. Let me do some brief introductions, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Norwood and Dr. Burke. As I mentioned, Kathy is faculty here at Fielding Graduate University. She teaches actively in our evidence-based coaching program and has for probably the last 15 years. She got her Ph.D. at Fielding. She has, along with Marianne Burke, created her company, which is Coaches Evolve, and their beautiful background is a little bit symbolic of that work. Kathy is a licensed heart math instructor. She's been in education for 38 years. She's done pre-K through 12, graduate level education, etc. She's one of the pioneers actually in education and coaching and blending those two disciplines. Marianne is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's worked with individuals and families. She's worked with those struggling with addiction and child abuse. She's also done quite a bit of work with returning combat veterans and their families. And both of them bring a heart for this topic. And so at this point, Dr. Norwood, Dr. Burke, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much. And Miss Marianne and I, we roll out the red carpet to all of you. We're thrilled that you're here today with us. We were talking this morning about how this venture started, the Coherent Coach. What are we feeding the field? A couple years ago when the pandemic started, we realized with the educators we were working with that they were sinking deeper and deeper into depression and crisis. And we had been aware of heart math for many years. It's a practice that we have worked into our lives. And we realized we were just losing people. People were losing themselves. Lots of tears when I was coaching on the phone, or they would come to classes and complete breakdowns. And so we thought, what if we could figure out how to bring this approach? It might possibly restore and bring hope to those working in the field. And so at that point, we started some training, and we chose heart math. We did a lot of research looking at the research out there, a lit review. We chose heart math for several reasons. Number one, they've been around 25, 30 years with just a massive amount of research. They're in over 400 peer-reviewed journals. They're worldwide. They work with the military, with the fire department, with policemen, with the health profession, with educators. And they're ongoing with their research. And they've been able to create classes and techniques that are for the layman, very easy to apply. And if practiced, it can truly transform your life. So we thought, why don't we start figuring out how we can begin to bring this to our educators? At the same time, they had a technology, which is a biofeedback tool that is portable. And so it allows us to provide biofeedback. And so as we're teaching them about their emotions and learning how to come into coherence, it's something they can practice with on a daily basis, and it shows them if they're in coherence or not. And we know as educators, we know as coaches that we cannot give something we don't have. And so the more we practice, the more we assimilate it, and it becomes a part of our being. As it becomes a part of our being, we're actually able to change the baseline within our brain. And so some of those old stress loops that just tear us down and deplete us can be changed, and we can create new neural pathways, and it can become much more normal as we build our internal life, much more normal to show up calm and at ease and at a place of peace, no matter what's going on in the outer world. So our hope was to help them interrupt those stress loops, that they could begin to recognize the depleting emotions and catch them, and turn it around with regenerative emotions and begin to find themselves again. So as we started that, we realized it was so impactful. We thought, why don't we do some research around this? This could really be powerful. We don't talk enough about mental and emotional well-being in the school systems. You know, we do in other fields, but not there. And we thought if we could show some evidence, maybe there would be openness to be able to bring this in on a different level to help our students and help our educators. And what we've noticed over these last couple of years, besides the burnout rate, is that they're truly in that fight, flight, freeze mode. They're not able to handle what's happened. So many of them. And when they're in that space, they're not able to create an environment that is a learning environment for our students. They're just not able to do that. When we're not in coherence, when we're in that fight, flight mode, we're not able to create a learning environment or learn ourselves. So we know that the inner life of the educator, and I'm saying education today because this is my field, but this fits for any field. I know we have a lot of professional coaches here today from different fields. This works for all of you. It's our inner life first, where we truly learn to embody the coaching heart and mindset. We learn and understand what coherence is so that we can begin to transform the ecosystem, the culture, the field that we work within. So Marianne and I are going to teach around that today. It's a little bit different than those of you that have had classes with me before. This is going to be much more of a course around creating awareness and understanding the big picture. So it won't be as much back and forth like I normally do. That can be saved for teaching classes down the road, but we want to give you some very vital information. All right, so we're ready to get started here. The coherent coach. What are we feeding the field?
Our job today is to offer hope. That's what we're all about. We, as Kathy just said, we've recognized the demoralized state of educators during the pandemic, but also before. This is not a new situation for educators. We believe that we have found something that can help them to find a resilient and nourishing ecosystem that rewards effort and fosters renewal. We're going to talk about our two ongoing interrelated research projects, as Kathy just said, that explore how the scope of coaching could be broadened to include teaching and coaching for mental and emotional regeneration.
All right, so Marianne mentioned two interrelated projects. Project 2 was birthed out of Project 1, and we're already aware that Project 3 is soon to be down the road because there's so much new information coming out of the research that we're gathering here. So for our experience today, we're going to be talking about the research. We're going to open with talking about some of the data around the current stress levels in our schools with our educators and our leaders. And then we'll spend some quality time defining coherence and what we mean by feeding the field. We'll look at nature, animals, humans, ecosystems, and toward the end, we'll bring closure with some of the data from both of our research projects that are still ongoing. All right. So Julio Olala says that we live in an emotional soup. We live in an emotional soup. And if the emotional body doesn't shift within us during coaching, there's not going to be a change. Those emotions, energy in motion in our body are 24/7. There's always an emotional soundtrack playing 24/7, flooding our body. What are those emotions? Are they depleting emotions that are really taking over and basically sucking us dry, right? Depleting our energy? Are they regenerative emotions? Are they a combination of both? How do they then impact those around us when that's going on within us 24/7? I love opening with this wonderful little visual, and I'll just give you a moment to enjoy it. This is such a picture of what is experienced on a daily basis in the workplace, isn't it? Kids really have the freedom to show how they're feeling. But all of us show up with certain attitudes and moods and feelings and behaviors that are exhibited based on our state of being on any given day. So I love this. Look at that Sunday night. All right. So emotions affect our physiology more than our thoughts do. They're the primary drivers of all of the activity in our major body systems. So our immune system, our cardiovascular, our nervous system, our hormones, they're all impacted based on the emotions that are floating through our body. And they determine our level of engagement in life's events, on how we show up, how engaged we can be, how connected we can be. We're basically an energy system. So we're always expending and renewing energy. If you think about waking up in the morning, supposedly we have a full battery. We only have so much energy to expend during the day before it's depleted. So do we have the techniques in the midst of accelerated and very chaotic, complex times in our job? Do we have the techniques that help us regenerate in the moment? Or do we wait until we get home and we go for a run, or we call a friend, or we take a nap, or we might have a glass of wine, right? We've got some of those pieces in place for ourselves when we're done with the work. This is all about learning how to manage it and become aware of it in the moment and shift it and change it. So in our coaching work, we work on all levels here: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And as all of these areas in our life come together, we come into a level of coherence, which we'll define in a moment. Now, in our trainings, we spend a lot on the emotional domain. We spend a lot of focused time because this tends to be where we deplete our emotions or deplete our energy even more. You know, you can think about a car, your car. How many times did you leave the light on the night before? And you go out and you can't start the battery. And how frustrating that is. And so just gradually leaking all day long. And all of a sudden we're depleted and we're not operating at our best selves. This is an example of the biofeedback tool that our coaches and our educators receive and they practice. And this little device here shows them when it's in the red, they're out of coherence. When it's in the blue, they're moving toward. And when it's in green, they're in coherence. And they learn to stay longer periods of time in that state and really experience what it feels like, so they're able to replicate it throughout the day. So I love the word intelligent here, because this is all about being very conscious about our energy and our emotional state throughout the day, and making choices moment by moment in what to do with what's going on. So we learn to consciously shift it instead of feeling like it's taking us over. Our heart rate variability, when we practice with the biofeedback, it measures our heart rate. Our heart rate variability is basically, very simply, it's just the space in between each of the heart of the beats. And when we're in coherence, I'll show you what it looks like. This is a great picture. Actually, we'll start with when we're out of coherence. This is what our heart rate can look like on that little device, and it tells us we're out of coherence. Most times, these are the motions running through us when we're in that space: frustration, irritation, impatience, worry, overwhelm. And I would guess that most of us live in this state a big part of the time when we're working in the schools. And so this person was asked to think of something that was frustrating, and this was the picture that came about. And it inhibits our brain function. We're not able to function at our best selves. This person was then asked to think of something that they were grateful for, as a level of appreciation, and do some breathing. This brought her into a place of coherence. Here, it's like having your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. Very chaotic, erratic. You're just not your best self. Here, we move into a place where there's a synchronicity and a calmness and an ease and a knowing, and we're much more connected to ourselves. So it promotes optimal performance for us, but it also promotes our own well-being. One more example, this was a couple. They were driving in the car, and the man had a monitor on, a heart monitor on, and they got into an argument. So you can see where his resting heart rate was. They got into an argument, and it shot up to 140 beats a minute. And it stayed there for 15 minutes. Now, when they made up and the argument ended, what I want you to notice here is the heart rate never returned to baseline right away. There was another full hour that the heart rate was elevated. So in just looking at this, you think about how much energy was depleted with that outburst, with what went on there. Now, when we come into coherence, it doesn't mean that our heart rate is always going to be at a resting heart rate. I could be an EMT out in the world working at a fast rate at 170 beats per minute, but be in coherence. And I could be home sitting on the couch practicing a mindfulness technique, but if I've got worry and overwhelm going on in my mind and I'm trying to come into that space, I could not be in coherence. I could be incoherent. So it's not always about slowing down, right, and being at a resting space. It's learning how to be connected physiologically at all times during the day, whether we're running or whether we're able to sit down and be in a calm space. So again, our heart rhythms affect our physical and mental performance. When we're not in coherence, it inhibits our prefrontal cortex. And so it inhibits our ability to think clearly, to make clear decisions. We're not as patient, we're not as caring. When we are in coherence, we're in a place where those heart attributes and those heart qualities are much more prevalent. We're able to draw from them. We have greater patience. We have a greater ability to make clear decisions. We're able to create and envision at a deeper level. We're able to draw that wisdom up from our heart space. We speak with more grace. We're kinder. We're more loving. We're more compassionate. So energy balance, that's what these trainings are all about, that we're always giving out and receiving, and we want to find that balance for our mental and emotional state of being. And in this process, then we learn how to build the resilience so that we can change the baseline and learn to be in coherence for greater periods of time. So we're able to prepare ahead of time because we're consciously aware of what we might be walking into. And then we learn how to recover quickly, adapt in the face of stress, challenge, and adversity. And we can learn to build resilience on this level emotionally. All right, Miss
Okay, my turn. I think this picture kind of says it all about the current state of education. Educators are holding their heads and they're wondering what the heck happened to my wonderful job. Here is a visual that came up to my mind when I thought about where we're really at with education. We have overused our fields. We've fed them very little, if anything at all. We've depleted them. They've become totally barren of any kind of life-sustaining nutrients. And so, like in the 1930s, when farmers faced this very situation on their farms, educators are leaving. They're going away because they have to survive. It's a survival level feeling that they have because their profession in their heart looks like this.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. That's such a powerful metaphor, you know. And so when we've written an article, we're waiting for it to be published. When we were doing our review of the literature, it was just astounding what was coming out. This comes out of the National Education Association. This was just last February. 55% of educators thinking of leaving the profession. That's over half. Where just last August, it was 37%. A year ago, it was 25%. So it's doubled within a year. It's even greater in the communities of color. 62% of surveyed Black leaders and educators and 59% of our Latino leaders and educators who are already underrepresented were contemplating a new profession. An additional piece was all around our leaders, our principals, and our superintendents wanting to quit because they're just being attacked on so many different levels.
Okay, so what we're seeing here is that the situation is critical. This first sentence, in some districts, resignations were 96% higher in 2022 than in previous years, even during the pandemic. Now, this happens to be referring to Washington, D.C., where I believe traditionally it's been rather difficult to retain good staff. But still, it's very, very sobering, like you just said, Carrie, that 96% resigned. Now, where does that put the teachers who are still there? Well, they don't have much support because everybody's stretched very, very thin trying to cover all the bases. And administrators who are stressed out by the responsibilities of their jobs are micromanaging those who are there to make sure everything gets done. So the pressure is on.
Another piece of research came out in June 2022. So just this last June, this is the American Federation of Teachers. 2,400 were surveyed, 74% dissatisfied with their jobs. A year ago, or 2 years ago, it was 41%. 40% are thinking that they'll leave within 2 years. And this one breaks my heart. 74% would not recommend the teaching profession to a prospective new teacher. And they're teachers, right? And so you realize how demoralized they are and how diminished education has just become so devalued in the eyes of our country, and there's not the help needed at this point to be able to retain those teachers and those educators.
Right, and this screen, as Kathy just said, it shows how little America values its teachers. It's a situation that's been existing for quite a while. It's become more transparent in the past few years. There's a crisis of morale and confidence. The belief that you can go into teaching and make a difference. People don't believe that anymore. There was a study that was just that came out, I think, yesterday or the day before, where they're talking about how they looked at teachers as compared to other professions, and they found that teachers reporting anxiety was 40% higher than first responders. That is astounding. They were surprised by the results when they saw the statistics. That means medical personnel working on the front lines with people who are dying of COVID reported less anxiety than teachers. And they found that 60% of teachers teaching at home remotely had 60% higher anxiety simply because of the isolation.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. Wow. So we know there's just so much research that says the biggest impact on our students are our teachers, more than any other factor. And so there's a huge warning. If we're looking for quick fixes, there's going to be a backfire. If we're just trying to put anybody into the classroom, if they're not prepared. Teaching is so complex, it takes years to learn how to teach effectively and to learn how to lead effectively in the school systems and learn how to differentiate and meet the needs of our students. Let me show you, and this is so very sad to us. This actually was, whoops. This was in Las Vegas. They're looking for substitute teachers. High school diploma or an equivalent. So does that mean that somebody who's gone through 9th grade and went out and got a GED is now able to step into the classroom and work with our juniors and seniors ready to move on to college? The other piece that's so striking here is if you can talk somebody else into it, step into the classroom, and they're there for 3 days, you get an Amazon card for $25. I tell you, this breaks my heart. Go ahead, Marianne.
Okay, new teachers, 1/5 of the new teacher hires in this country have never had any practice with kids ahead of time. Think about that. They're stepping into the classroom with these babies, as you see in this picture, and they don't know what they're doing. No wonder they have the highest rates of turnover of any group of teachers. They go into a situation where they're in over their heads from day one. So, what do we have to do? Well, clearly, we have to retain and nurture experienced educators. We have to recruit and nurture prospective new teachers. But how do we do this?
Yeah.
Well, all educators need a resilient, regenerative, nourishing ecosystem that rewards their effort and fosters their renewal. We think that coherent leaders and coaches are in a very unique position to be able to support and guide those educators to cultivate that beneficial ecosystem that they so desperately need.
So let's go ahead and just spend a little time now talking about, so what is coherence? It's an optimal state of being grounded in one's physiology, in which the heart, the mind, and the emotions are all aligned and in sync. Everything is energetically working together. Physiologically, the immune, the hormonal, and the nervous systems function in a state of energetic coordination. And it's also a place of centered presence. We're able to be present and grounded and in the moment and fully available for those around us. So key words here are entrainment, resonance, synchronization. Have you ever walked into a grandfather clock store? Those are the coolest things. I just love antiques and I love grandfather clocks. But they often talk about when new clocks come in, it doesn't take long before they're all synchronized and moving together.
Well, we're talking about feeding the field. My mind goes back to that Dust Bowl picture. They didn't feed the field there, literally or figuratively. So we're talking about field in a very specific sense of coming out of quantum field theory. Scientific studies have shown that our hearts generate a biomagnetic field that exercises an energetic influence on our environment, creates an ecosystem. So essentially, our hearts create an electromagnetic field that not only governs our behavior and dynamics and choices, but of the entire ecosystem in which we exist, in which we live.
Now, the way coherence is defined in education is all external. It's about describing the alignment of evaluations and reform initiatives, standards, and instructional practices. So this word is being used, but it's all about the external. It's not the internal state of being. And here's what's less understood. Our educators' effectiveness and the results they achieve starts with and ends with their physiology and their perceived well-being. Are they connected to the fullness of themselves? Can they show up full and able to provide for our kids? What drives our behavior is our thinking, which is largely determined by our feelings, which themselves are the awareness of our emotions. That's that energy in motion, which are made of our physiological signals. So the field goes so far beyond what we can imagine. Now, in heart math, there are some tools, some instruments that they talk about. And very simply, when there's an electrical current, our heart has an electrical current, there's going to be a magnetic field, right? They go hand in hand. So the heartbeat produces electricity, and it can be measured. They call it magnetometers. And they're able to measure someone's magnetic field out 3 meters. Now, in our thinking, the only reason it goes out to 3 meters is that's as much as the instrument's able to show. And in a moment, Marianne's done a huge review of literature on coherence and the magnetic field. So she's going to share some pretty astounding information. When we are in heart coherence, we radiate that good electromagnetic signal to those around us, and it impacts the nervous systems of people and of animals and of our plants, etc. Everything is impacted. Our thoughts, our emotions, and our attitudes affect the vibration in the heart's magnetic field, which energetically affects others positively or negatively, whether we're aware of it or not. So how many times have we walked into a room and you just feel it? You can feel the tension and you just want to turn around and leave, and maybe nothing was said. Or other times you enter into the presence of a group and you feel so included, so cared about, so known, and maybe they haven't even said anything. But the field there, right, is what is communicating to you the attitudes, the moods, the behaviors of the people.
Okay, now here's a part that really grabs me. We are not alone in this business of building coherence and participating in a field. Everything is a part of everything, essentially. And scientific literature has shown time and time again that there are many, many, many interconnections in this universe that create an ecosystem that we all participate in. What are mother trees? What the heck? There's a researcher, Dr. Suzanne Simard, who teaches at the University of British Columbia and works in their Department of Forest and Conservation. And she has done tremendous amount of research on forests, the old growth forests especially. She's found that they actually have a way of perceiving, connecting, and interrelating with each other, that there's a web of interdependence underground in which they all participate when they are in this close connection with each other. The older trees, she's called the mother trees, because she's observed that they have a really remarkable caretaking function. Traditional researchers say that trees in the forest compete with each other for resources, and therefore we have to thin out the forest. She says, no, that the older trees share resources with the younger saplings. They can't quite reach up the heights to create their own nutrients. And remarkably, these older trees are able to tell when there's a sapling that's related to them somehow and a sapling that comes from another tree. If resources are limited and they have to choose, they're going to choose their own saplings first. But generally, they feed all. And obviously, because of this rule, she calls them the mother trees.
And Marianne, share what happens when they do thin out the forests. What happens to those trees that are standing alone?
Well, basically, when trees are in old growth forests like this, if let's say there's an infestation of insects, a tree is attacked, it puts out signals to the other trees to warn them, to alarm them that something bad is happening here. And they have the time, they're able to create defenses against those insects. And so trees survive because they're able to communicate with each other. They find that when trees are clear cut and they plant the newer trees and so forth, they don't have that communication system. And so they're much, much more vulnerable to insect invasions, drought, you name it.
Yeah. And that reminds me so much of some of the isolation that a lot of our educators are feeling today. They're not receiving that nourishment in the way that they need, and they're feeling really alone and burned out. So let's now look at the energetic field on a couple other levels. How do we connect with animals? Wonderful. This comes from HeartMath, wonderful research project, a boy and his dog. They were both given heart monitors. They were in separate rooms. And so this was Mabel, the dog's heart rate. And this was Josh, the young boy. They asked Josh to enter into the room and not talk to the dog, not pet him, just stay separate, but sit down and come into coherence and then send love and care to Mabel. And look what happens. This is so beautiful. They synchronize, their heart rhythms synchronize, and they come into coherence together. Once they left the room, Josh returned to his level, and Mabel returned to hers. There's also quite a bit out there on horses and their owners. It's very similar, the synchronization, and horses have a huge magnetic field with their heart. They have huge hearts. But when the owner is focused on feelings of love and appreciation for horses, again, they synchronize together. They come into that oneness. A mother and her baby. This is beautiful. They ask the mother not to touch the baby. The baby's sleeping. And look at this. This is so incredible. The mother's just sending love. And the mother's brain waves sync to the baby's heartbeats right here. Isn't that incredible? And then one final piece. This is really powerful when you think about working with teams. They took 40 people and they put them into groups of 4, 10 groups of 4. They taught 3 of the 4 how to come into coherence in some of these techniques. And then they did a study. They put them all together. And at some point, they asked the 3, okay, now, and they did it privately. Go ahead and do your breathing, come into coherence, and then let's see what happens. So this is the 4th. This person had not been taught the techniques, and you can see was out of coherence in this setting. But once the other 3 emanated and fed the field with coherence, look what happens. came right into coherence. You think about the work that we're doing with teams in the schools. Let's now find out, well, what would the percentage be? How many people do we need to have that could learn how to do this that would really impact the field? But before I turn that over to Marianne, to me, this is really an important piece, is that we're looking at positive energy, not positive thinking. Now, when I'm in positive energy, I might have some positive thoughts, but positive energy is 4 times more important in predicting performance than influential leaders. So again, it's the energy. Are we in coherence, and what are we feeding the field? And is it uplifting? And is it sending that positive, fostering that collaboration and that inclusion and that team spirit? We've got the ability to do that quietly.
Well, for those in education, the fainting couch is necessary. Love and appreciation, what a concept. In education, I don't know. They found that subjects who get into compassion, a state of compassion, move into a physiological state of greater coherence, and they radiate magnetic waves that affect the surrounding environment. So they're able to shift the whole environment into a more harmonious state. And they've also found that physical barriers don't matter. In one experiment that's referred to here, the researcher had a subject in one room, and they were radiating feelings of love and appreciation for someone who was in the next room behind closed doors. Their hearts synchronized beautifully, their heartbeats synchronized, so that it went beyond the limitation of the wall. Now, here's something else that's really impressive. Physical distance doesn't matter. We can bring coherence to communities, and we don't need large numbers of people to do it. They found, this is research in transcendental meditation. They've done a tremendous amount of research in this area. They found that when a group of people representing as little as 1% of the total population of a given area are meditating on peace, love, harmony, so forth, that they observed, researchers observed statistically significant reductions in violent behavior in communities, cities, and even countries. They did research in Lebanon, in the Middle East, that showed that violence and acts of war decreased during the time period when they were doing this experimentation with meditation.
Boy, that is so impactful, Marianne. And you know, when you begin to think about the schools, a lot of times educators can feel like they don't have enough that are envisioning the same type of thing they are. But if this is true, right, you think about the small number that can change and totally recreate an ecosystem in a school, in a district.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is based on robust literature, lots and lots of research, 40 years of research, over 650 authors, research at 300 universities in 31 countries, and published in almost 200 academic journals. This is not a fly-by-night, occasional study, casually conducted. This is rigorous research that's showing that 1% can affect hundreds of thousands of people.
So if we know that the few can affect the many, we're realizing how important it is to have focused coherence and learn to stay in it for longer periods of time and to be able to increase our coherence levels. It has much more power than incoherence. What seems to matter the most is that we maintain that focus and we can then project it. We radiate it out to a unified quantum field. And the key here in this statement is systematic amplification. It doesn't just touch one or two, it amplifies and it impacts and it nourishes the entire ecosystem. We are that powerful. We are that powerful. All right, so what I'm going to do here, we don't have much time left, but I'm going to show you just a few things. We have 2 research projects going on that's a mixed method, quantitative and qualitative. Our quantitative is a normative assessment. And basically that first course is about 3 weeks of training. There are 6 modules and they're meeting 2 hours on Zoom twice a week. That's it, because they're Zoom fatigued. And so we do it after school twice a week for 3 weeks. They practice the inner balance for 15 minutes and they learn several emotional management tools. This assessment looks at emotional vitality, emotional stress levels, organizational stress levels, and physical stress levels. This is, of course, what many of us feel when we're really stressed out. Really impacts us on all levels. But here's the important piece. Statistically significant changes within a 3-week period of time. That's almost unheard of in every single category. Emotional vitality, the organizational stress levels reduced, the emotional stress level, the physical stress level. So that means that less than 1% chance that something else could have caused that outcome. Less than 1%. So the intervention is working, and there's evidence in all areas. They take this assessment and they break it down even more, where we're looking at our buoyancy, our contentment. We're in organizational stress, we're looking at the pressures that we deal with and the relational tension. And one really important piece that we looked at was the intention to quit. Under emotional stress, there's anxiety and depression, anger and resentment, fatigue and health symptoms. And to see statistically significant changes in all of those areas is phenomenal. So organizational stress is reduced by 27%, emotional vitality increased by 15%. Emotional stress reduced by 22, physical stress reduced by 20, double digits. And then look at this piece, the intention to quit. What I have heard people say is, I have found myself again. I feel like I'm waking back up. I'm getting back in touch with me. I'm getting back in touch with the passion that I had when I went into teaching. And I want to figure out how to sustain this and take this back where I work so we can retain our educators. And then just real quickly, they're not having to defend themselves anymore. There's better sleep. There's less aches and pains in the body. There's more of a calmness, more alignment with self, inner peace. And one of the big takeaways was that my coherence or incoherence can have an impact on others. And practicing being in coherence can influence both my well-being and others. So imagine all of us waking up and realizing the responsibility we have to manage our emotions. And the very last piece of research we'll show very quickly here. This is what was birthed out of research 1. And Marianne, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Basically, I'll be very quick here. 18 participants, so it's a small number, but it's a beginning number, took Activating the Heart of Teams, which is another training. And basically what they learned was how to become coherent coaches and how to enter into their coaching sessions in that state, to maintain it in their coaching sessions. So essentially we asked them 5 questions. What techniques do you practice to prepare? So they mentioned, of course, the heart math techniques, since they just studied them, but they also mentioned mantras, meditation, deep breathing, mindfulness, and even prayer. How has preparing this way affected your feelings about yourself during sessions with individual coaches or teams? Increased confidence, increased feelings of emotional self-control and personal power, increased open-mindedness, increased focus and clarity, higher perceived quality of one's coaching abilities and outcomes, increased sense of purpose and well-being, which directly impacts the desire to stay in the job. They, based on your observation, how do you think this affected your coachee? They observed that there was a link between the coach's ability to listen deeply and the coachee's openness to engage in a deep conversation, something meaningful rather than just pleasantries and passing the time to get out. They observed that the heart coherence opened the individual's creativity, the ability to think of new, better solutions for situations. And overall, they felt more in sync and feel more connected, which is one of the things that people are entering into, needing to have that kind of synchronization, that kind of connection.
Yeah. And what I love about this is they're not only accessing their deeper wisdom and ability as a coach, because they have such a strong sense of well-being, but they're accessing it within their clients. So there's much more creativity and flow.
So essentially, while coaching, this is another question we asked, have you ever been affected by your coachee's lack of inner coherence? They said, yeah, we have. Some of us, really have. And they felt that it somehow threw them off balance on occasion, not always, but it had the potential of doing that, cause them to become confused, feel rushed, kind of lose focus on what their purpose was there and what their job was supposed to be with the client. Some entered into a kind of codependence where they wanted to problem solve for the client and so forth. So it brought out a whole bunch of things. The remedy generally was, fall back on your training, get back into heart-focused breathing. What have you learned about yourself? My presence and energy is critical to support my people. When I'm centered, I'm a better coach. I can shift to my heart and stay that way throughout a full session. I was most often amazed at what I had accomplished and how things went. Inner coherence has made my coaching experiences go deeper, which means that there's a deeper impact on the entire ecosystem. And here is a word cloud that gives a picture of how they felt at the end of their training.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. This is there's such a shift, right? Can you imagine showing up in this state of being, your beingness, when you're coaching or when you're working with teams or when you're teaching or when you're leading in the schools? I mean, it's just so powerful, the change that has taken place over time. I believe that the baselines are really changing. All right, so that is, in a nutshell, very quickly, a lot of information, but we are bringing hope. We believe that there are answers. We believe that we can take this into the schools and into other places of work, and that we can truly impact the ecosystems once we learn how to do it ourselves. Miss Carrie, sorry we went over.
No apology needed. I kind of feel like all of us as coaches have been perhaps invited into a call to action around our own heart-centered breathing and how we are showing up for our clients and how we can be part of that 1%. It is a lot to process today. So much great content, original research, a lot of statistics. I did mention in chat, I'm going to be sending out 3 documents to everyone who registered with some additional information. And I'll also put in Dr. Norwood and Dr. Marianne Burke's contact information so that if needed, you can redirect questions to them since we're a bit limited on time. Lots of thank yous and appreciation in the chat. I also put in the chat 2 links, one to take the evaluation if you're credentialed and you need an ICF CEU, and the other is a save the date for next month's webinar brought by Dr. Deepa Awal, and it's such a good follow-up because it's the frameworks of emotion. And so be back for that one. And yeah, I just want to echo everything in chat. This was fantastic. Thank you both for your
Mhm.
commitment to this. I've seen evidence of this through the last couple of years as I've been part of this evidence-based coaching program, of just the fidelity Dr. Norwood and Dr. Burke show towards this body of knowledge and research, and what a gift to bring it to the community. I'm sorry we didn't have time for Q&A. I will leave the room open for just a couple minutes, but for the rest of you, feel free to go about your day with some heart-centered breathing, and have a wonderful holiday season. We hope to see you back in December.
Thank you. And please feel free to reach out and ask questions. There's always space to have further conversations here around all of this.